So, in the parsha, it starts talking about Yitzchok wanting to give the Brochos to Esau. Then he starts giving it to Yaakov instead. The whole story. But what prompted Yitzchok to give the Brochos at this particular time? So Yitzchok said, why? On the words, I do not know the day when I will pass. So since he doesn't know when he will pass, so he wanted to bench Esau before he would pass away. So this is what Parsha say. Pirish Rashi, Amr B'Shul Ben Karcham, Im Magia Adam LePerek Avoisav, Yidag Chomesh Shanim Lefneihem, VeChomesh LaAcher Kein. V'Yitzchok Hoya Ben Kufchav Gimel Shana, Shem LePerek Imi Ani Magia, V'Hi Bas Kufchav Zayin Mesa, V'Areini Ben Hei Shanim Samach LePirka. 5 years before 127 is 123. Lefichach lo yadaiti yoy moisi, or actually 127. He was going 122, going into 123. He was saying Kapitel Kufchav Gimel. Lefichach lo yadaiti yoy moisi, shamala perik imi, shamala perik abba. I mean, in the Ha'ara, he talks about exactly what was the numbers over there. Was it 123, 122? He gets into that a little bit in the footnote. So the Rebbe is analyzing Rashi in the style that the Rebbe always wants to know. First of all, what does Rashi have to explain something? For what reason? Especially if the information that Rashi is telling us is already there earlier, Rashi doesn't have to explain it. Another thing is that Rashi always doesn't usually do, and the rare occasions that he does do it, we need to have an explanation for it, is why he mentions the name of the Bala Memra. Almost everything in Rashi is taken from a Maimer Chazal somewhere. And most of those Mamor Chazal have a person that it says that said this particular Maimer Chazal. But the Rashi doesn't usually say it. The cases when Rashi does bring down the name of the Bala Memra is because there is something that we can learn out from it. The Rebbe usually, in this Sikha, he doesn't use that term, but usually the Rebbe uses a term that a Talmud Memulach, a sharp Talmud, might come up with an additional question, and Rashi answers it by hinting with the name of the Bala Memra. So this is the two questions that the Rebbe is going to ask. With Tzarech Lahavim Aleph, Malay l'Rashi l'chapes taimim l'amiris Yitzchok lo yadaiti yoyim moisi. B'shashi Yitzchok ba'atzmai higdem abir taimim. V'yoymer hine nazokanti. V'lochein lo yadaiti yoyim moisi. He's old. That's why. He has to explain because of 5 years before and 5 years after, and I don't know if it's my father, I don't know if it's my mother, and if it's my mother and 5 years before, and now I'm 123 going to be. What does he have to go into? He said, I'm old. A person that's old doesn't know when he's going to pass away. It's a normal thing. A person gets old. One of the things happens in old age, the person passes away. Why does Rashi have to go into explaining all these things? What would be the problem if Rashi would have not have said it? When we learn this pasuk in Chumash, Rashi needs to address a certain problem. What would be the problem if Rashi wouldn't have said it? It's obvious. I'm old. I don't know when I'm going to pass away. Very simple. Beis l'shem mahu tzarich Rashi l'hav l'shem bala maimer mahu haprat she'enei bor oy enei mechuver kol tzarkoi hamizbayer heite b'al yidei yediyah shepirish zeh Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. And the footnote, he says, that's Kemeduber Kamapamim, that Rashi will only bring down the Bala Memra if he's trying to tell you something by knowing who's the one that said it. Vabir bezem, the Parsha Kedems, Namar vayivorech elikimes Yitzchok. So this is an interesting thing. What was this bracha that Hashem gave Yitzchok? It doesn't say what he did. One Pirush is Rashi says, Nichum Avelim. Another thing is, because Rashi explains, Yitzchok did not get a bracha from Avraham. But derech klal, Parents bless their kids. Yitzchok wanted to bench Esav, he benched Yaakov, and then afterwards he benched Esav also. Yaakov benched all of his children. Yitzchok did not get a bracha from Avraham, and because of that, Vayivarach Elokim es Yitzchok. Why didn't Yitzchok get a bracha from Avraham? Pirish Rashi, Nesyara Avraham levarach es Yitzchok, mipnei shetzafa es Esav yoytzim memenu. Omar, Yavai bala brachas, in other words Hashem, v'yivarach es asher yitav be'enav, uba kadosh baruch hu berachos. Let Hashem decide who and what he's going to bench, and therefore, Avraham didn't actually want to bench Yitzchok. And therefore it says, Vayivarach Elokim es Yitzchok. Well, lefi zeh, kasher v'posuk dedan, birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmai, bala brachas, shahoyse b'dei Yitzchok. Yitzchok, instead of getting a bracha from Avraham, he got a super bracha now. He got a bracha from Hashem himself, Vayivarach Elokim es Yitzchok, instead of getting it from his father. Bevadai kelelas Arichus Yamim. That's like a basic bracha. V'im kein loy hoy loy Yitzchok lidog miyay moise b'shnas hakuf chov gimel chayav v'arayim Avraham and Sarah shniz baruch hu meis HaKadosh Baruch Hu erichu yamim yoysim kuf chov gimel shana. Avraham and Sarah, Sarah lived 127 and Avraham lived 175. So therefore, why did he have to worry? If Avraham and Sarah got a bracha from Hashem and they had Arichus Yamim, so Yitzchok also shouldn't have said, Lo yodaiti es yoy moisi. He could have relied. He has a bracha from Hashem, Vayivarach Elokim es Yitzchok. Surely he's going to have Arichus Yamim. That's why Rashi has to explain why Lo yodaiti es yoy moisi. Why are you worried about when you're passing away? Shadagos shel Yitzchok ba mezeh shenichnas leperik shel chamesh shanim lefnei ptiras imay. Ube'amrei hine nazakanti hoysa kavanase loy lezikna stam ela legil mesuyam hakashur im perik imay. So what it means, hine nazakanti, doesn't mean stam I'm old, and because I'm old I may pass away. He wasn't worried that just because he got old he'd pass away, because he had a bracha for Arichus Yamim. But rather, hine nazakanti has to do with reaching close to the age of his mother, and because of that, he was worried. V'adayin yesh makom lishoel ketzad oil klal ze bekana echad im shnois chayav sheyiskor poil meya v'shmoinim shana he lived. Harbe yoyser mechamesh shanim l'samach pirke di'imay v'zois miyashav Rashi b'devarav shekama ifanim b'dover Chameshanim lifnei oile achrei perik avoisav, and that itself could be not just his mother, but also his father. But perik avoisav gufa, perik imoy, perik aviv. Veitel Yitzchok shechai kuf peishanim neskayim bepoyel ha'oifen the chameshanim la'achar perik aviv, like I mentioned before. Avraham Avinu lived till 175, so Yitzchok lived till 180. Amnam, l'chura gam lacher bir Rashi pirushoim, adayin hakushya b'mkoyma Midas. It's still difficult. What does a bracha mean? A bracha is much more than a tefillah. Let's say if someone is davening for something, they're usually being mispalel for something that's a regular need, a chesaron. I need money, I daven to have money. I need gesund, I need health, I daven for gesund. If someone gets a bracha means something over the top. It doesn't mean that you're going to have your basic needs. That's not what it means, a bracha. When you say a person has a bracha in parnasa, for example, that means he can make ends meet. That means he can just cover the mortgage and the rent. No. If you say he has a bracha in parnasa, that means it's me'al v'leiver. It's more than what would be normal. So if so, the Rebbe is going to ask, since Yitzchok had a bracha from the Eibishter concerning his everything, including the length of his life, so why was he still worried? The idea of five years before and 5 years after is the normal thing. And he had a bracha. A bracha is so much more. Let's see it inside. Bevadai hevia habracha shebirach HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yitzchok lo yisafa beprati chayav v'chol shkein be'etzem ha'chayim gufa hayisafa b'arichus yamim Yoiser masher haya tzarich lichis mitzad hateva. V'im kein me'achar shafil al piyasei da rogel. Magia adam legila samach leperik avoisav. Hari bevadai hoisifa ha-bracha shebeirach HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Yitzchok shonim Yeseiris ala mispar shonim the perik avoisav. And therefore, we have a few questions over here. If Yitzchok should have had, because of the Bracha of Hashem, more than the perik of avoisav, the period around when his parents passed away. So first of all, the question is, Aleph, Madu loichai Yitzchok yoiser mekuf beishana. Haloi mispar shonim zeh eine godel magia gam al pi derech hateva. Ve'aye aisafa Arichus Yamim matzrich alavim tzad birchas Hashem. Very simple question. He had a bracha for Arichus Yamim. Isn't a normal person supposed to live within 5 years before or 5 years after his parents? So he had the same thing like a normal person. He didn't have a special bracha in Arichus Yamim. He lived 5 years after his father passed away, 180 instead of 175. Where was the bracha in Yitzchok's life that he lived longer? Beis, Chenish lahakshis gamal amiris Yitzchok, kvar bi Yosef ben kuf chav gimel, he was already worried. Lo yadaiti yoy moisi, me'achar shnois of Oz, oilis l'mispar hashonim hakotim bi Yosef, shoy tzarich lichyos al pi haseder rogel b'teva, chomesh shonim pachas min hakotzer shu perik arvoisav. V'abracha bevadoi hoisifa mashu l'mispar shonim elu. Madua Amar Kvar B'Yosef Ben Kuf Chav Gimel Lo Yadaiti Yoy Moisi. A very simple thing. The bare minimum of what would have been a normal lifespan, the lowest possible lifespan that it could have been, would have been 5 years before the parent that passed away the earliest. That would have been the least of the normal lifespans. In his case, his mother passed away at 127, so when he's going into his 123rd year, so then it's already 5 years before her passing. But that's the normal thing. Why was he worried then? He had a bracha. And he had a bracha which bracha includes also Arichus Yamim. Why would he even imagine that would be just the bare minimum of those 5 years before when even his mother passed away? So the Rebbe says a very interesting thing. You can't say that it would have been normal and regular and the bare minimum to live up to Sarah's lifespan or even Avram's lifespan. That's not part of the bracha. That's just naturally. Because their own life that they lived till 127 and to 175 was a bracha in itself. That wasn't natural. So therefore the fact that they lived to 127, 175 was not natural, so therefore also his bracha could be part of that. It doesn't have to go more than what they lived with their bracha. Let's see it inside. V'sara bas tishrim shana, hayu loirak begeders keinim elagam boim bayam. Everybody asks, what's the two expressions? V'avram v'sara's keinim boim bayamim. What's the keinim? We know, old. What's also boim bayamim? So the Rebbe says, what's boim bayamim means? Shemolu kol yamehem, Dainu kol hayomim asher huktzev alohem. Umashu poil erichu yimeim yoyser mitzad birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu shebeirach haisem. So the Rebbe says the meaning of the words ba bayomim is they got to the end of their normal lifespan. When Sarah was 90 and Avram was 100, they weren't just old, they had gotten to their natural limit. What would have been their natural and normal lifespan? Anything past that was already a bracha from the Eibishter. the fact that Avraham lived another 75 years, and the fact that Sarah lived another 37 years, that itself was because of the Eibishter's bracha. V'nimtza shemitzad ha'teva, l'loi birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kvar b'hiyoisoi ben kuf hei. When Yitzchok became 105, 5 years older than what Avraham Avinu was supposed to live, 5 years after Avraham Avinu was already Baba Yamim, Higia Yitzchak lemispar hashanim hagadol b'yoser haroi loy mitzat perek avoisav. He reached the natural limit, the terech hateva limit of what his life should have been. Cham hashanim yoser ameh hashanim asher huktzevu l'loy abrach la'aviv. Ki pirish perek avoisav hu ha-perek shalahem v'loy birchas ba'al brochos. When it says perek avoisav, that means what they were assigned, if not for the brachas of the Eibishter. U'memelam hein ali with the amis vehein lefi daite shel Yitzchok hoisifa birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu shonim rabis biyoser l'shnoisav shel Yitzchok b'diuk kemispar hashonim asher hoisifa birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'chayei aviv. This is an amazing thing. Exactly how much more Avraham Avinu lived more than his bracha. That's because of the bracha, in other words, more than his natural years. That's exactly the amount of time that Yitzchok lived more than should have been his natural years because of the bracha of the Eibishter. But Poel Chai Yitzchok Kuf Pei Shana. Ubezeh hoisifa birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu ayin hei shana al mispar kuf hei shana. Shu hagadol b'yoser sher magyei lav mitzad ha-seder ha-rogel. Cham mishanim yoser mea shana shehuktzevu la'avis. We said before that when Yitzchok reached the year kuf hei, when he became 105, that was 5 years extra to what the natural lifespan should have been for Avraham Avinu. So that means he reached at 105 to the maximum normal lifespan that Yitzchok should have lived. Lepoil, he lived 75 years more. So the bracha that Yitzchok got in Arichus Yamim was a bracha of 75 years extra life. Vareze mispar hashanim hameduyik shenois vayde bracha la'Avraham Aviv. Shachai kuf ayin hei shana l'maylo ha'me'aksuas like anal. We said that Avram's normal thing was supposed to be 100 years. He lived to 175, so he had 75 years extra because of Hashem's bracha. So the same thing, Yitzchok now had 75 years extra over his natural situation. By Cain, lefi daite shel Yitzchok. Shechasha Hashem mispar shnoisav yeh kotzer b'chamesh shanim miperek imi. He was worried. He said, my mother passed away 127. I'm going into my 123rd year. 5 years earlier, I should be worried. Hine acheshm b'zehu shabracha kvar hisifa loy kemispar asher hisifa le'imai. How much extra years did Sarah get?
37.
37. Haslasara huktzvu tishim shana, ula'achar bracha chai kuf chav zayin shana, hainu lamed zayin shana noisafis. So that was the bracha that Hashem gave to Sarah. She lived 37 years extra. Ukemay kein Yitzchok tzarech lichis ufi daite. Ula'loya bracha rak pei hei shana. Chamesh shanim pachas me'imay. He should have lived al piteva. His mother al piteva was supposed to live to 90. So he instead was supposed to live al piteva 85. So just like to his mother, the bracha added 37 years from 90 to 127. So this actually, even mathematically, fits exactly. not only mathematically does it fit exactly the 5 years before and the 5 years after, but exactly how much the bracha of his parents helped his Avraham and Sarah, that exact same type of bracha of our extra years, he felt would be something that he would get from the Eibishter. Avraham nifter 5 shanim koidem zmanei. Beglal bracha shal acheres shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu Elov. What was the other bracha that Hashem told Avraham Avinu? Tavai b'seva toiva. Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that when you pass away, it will be in a good old age. Meaning, you will only see nachas. You won't see anything negative come out of your children. So first of all, there was a bracha of Hashem that he gave Avraham Avinu, a bracha of Arichus Yamim. There was also another bracha that Hashem gave him that he's not going to pass away seeing Esav. Sheyachad im birchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'noisav l'chamesh shanim la'achar perek aviv hayaloi leYitzchok lichyes kuf pei hei shanam v'loi kuf pei bilvad. In other words, now the Rebbe is asking, Lepoyel, Yitzchok lived 180 years. And why do we say Yitzchok lived 180 years? Because just like Avraham Avinu's bracha lasted, the Arichus Yamim, 75 years more than his natural life, the same thing Yitzchok was supposed to live 75 years more than his natural life. If so, if really Avraham Avinu was supposed to live not 75 years more than his natural life, but he was really supposed to live 80 years more than his natural life, so the same thing, Yitzchok should have also lived 80 years more than his natural life and not pass away at 180, but he should have passed away at 185. So why Lepoyel did he pass away at 180? Zois miyashav Rashi beremes by Safas ha'inyan da Amar Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. That was the question, the second question we asked at the beginning of the Sikha. Why does Rashi feel the need to quote Rabbi Shua ben Karcha? The Gemara mesuperoi des kama tanoim shenishalu b'meh harachta yamim v'chol echad mehem hisker kama in yonim asher behem hoisloi zehiris miyuchedes u'beglolam zacha la'arichus yamim. One person never went to sleep without forgiving a person. One person never took advantage and never disrespected the students. Different types of things. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha had an interesting thing that he said that because of this he had Arichus Yamim. Va'af Rabbi Shua ben Karcha nishul ha'shayla zu b'meh arachti yamim ve'eshiv miyamai lo nistakalti b'dmus adam rasha dahainu shekisher es Arichus Yamim bezehirus zu greda. Just this alone, shekol yamav nizar milistakel b'dmus adam rasha. Harei Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha savar shazehirus milistakel b'dmus adam rasha kishala atzma shkula keneged kama inyanim hamiviyim la'arichus yamim umechlal heinat shemei alav. If it adds years, if it adds Arichus Yamim, not looking b'fnei adam rasha, some mistakel b'fnei adam rasha, goyrim le'adavar giroyin b'Arichus Yamim. Ubezeh miyushav mashi Yitzchok chai kuf peis shana belvad, kivin shaloi nimna b'listakel b'dmusay shal Esav, because he was around Esav. Now, the truth is, al pi pshuti shal mikra v'amnon lo yada sharashu. Umikol makim garma hayistaklos sheyugra memispar kuf pei hei shana haroi loy ha'inyan de samach leperik aviv hei shanim ubirchas hei Hashem pala sheyarech yamim kifi perik aviv. Only the 75 years that Avraham Avinu had, not the 80 years that Avraham Avinu should have had. He brings down even that the Gemara says that this is also the reason why Yitzchok's eyes became weak when he became old. It says, Rashi brings different things. One of the things the Gemara says is because he was looking at Esav Arasha. So we see that looking at Arasha has a bad effect on a person's health, on a person's life, etc. So now, of course, the Rebbe wants to always end with a positive thing. So another thing the Rebbe brings down from Rashi, what he calls Yenishal Torah. Pirish Rashi is Gam Yenishal Torah, the wine of the Torah, the inner ideas of the Torah. Hatama Pnimi L'chshashi Shal Yitzchok. Shema Mispar Shnoisav Yu Pachas Be'ishanim Eperek Imoi. Ha'oifen Hamuad B'yoisa Al Piseder Ateva. That's what he was worried about. The least natural situation. V'yasser Al Kain Be'perek Imoi Gufa Hechshiv Rakes Kufkov Zayin Hashanim Shechaya B'poyol Mebli habeit al kach shebe'emes hoysa tzricha laharich yamim yoysa v'rak b'sibas ha'akeda parcha nishmasa. The truth is, just like we said by Avraham Avinu before, that Avraham Avinu really was supposed to pass away at 180. The reason why he passed away 175 was so that Hashem didn't want him to see when Esav was yoytzel tarbas ra. In a similar vein, Sarah was supposed to live longer. The reason why she passed away when she passed away is because the Malach came and told her that Yitzchok was brought as a carbon for the Akedah. And because of that, Parcha Nishmasa. So the truth is that it's not even the true Perek of Imah. It's not even like the natural years when his mother was supposed to pass away. It's really even before the natural time. So why was that so? Why did he look at it this way? Why did he look at things in a negative way? Worried about the least possible situation of how young he's going to pass away. Like Chassidus brings down the whole time, Avraham was known, his midah was the midah of chesed. That's why he was machnes orchim. That's why he was meifitz alakus b'chol over v'shav. But Yitzchok says upachad Yitzchok hayali. Yitzchok was the level of gevurah, of yira. Therefore, gevurah is about looking at everything with the most stringent and disciplined eyes. Therefore, if he's going to look at the different possibilities when he could pass away, he doesn't say, well, Avraham lived till 175, I'll pass away 5 years after that. No. He doesn't even look like I'll pass 5 years before Avraham. He doesn't even look that I'll pass 5 years after my mother. He goes to the most stringent type of way, the most gevurah type of way, and says, you know what, my mother passed away 127, I'm going to be worried already in my 123rd year. That is the derech of Yitzchok. But here the Rebbe concludes with a very important point. When a person, people have different personalities. People have a nature of being more gevurah, and people have a nature of being more chesed. They said about a certain type of person that always used to get into fights, a big, Rebbe, whatever, that they said about him, if he would be alone in the forest, he would fight with the trees. There are people that by B'teva, they're Midas Hagevurah. But you gotta know where to turn the Gevurah. Yitzchok's turning the Gevurah was on himself. I will not live till my father's time, or even 5 years past my mother's time. I will perhaps live only till 5 years before my mother's time. That's the way a person that's Gevurah is supposed to do. About himself, but not about others. El Shizu Oisan Gosa Shal Yitzchok Ra Klapi Atzmai. Ilu Be'esha Berech Zazulas Hoysa Birchasai Lefi Eifen Hanayla Be'yoiser. The Hepech Hagevurah Vatzimtzum. Just the opposite of this. V'kalla B'soicha Heinas Enyanim the Shamayim V'einas Enyanim the Oretz. He could have just given a bracha from the Shamayim, or given us a bracha from Aretz. So Yitzchok's bracha was all-inclusive, both Shamayim and Aretz. Ubehem gufa mital hashamayim mishmane haaretz. Chassidus explains Tal Shamayim is a very heavy level and high level in Atik, and Shemane Haaretz is also a very high level. Even Begashmius, we know that the difference between Tal and Matar is do, it says, never stops. There is Tal loy metzer, the Gemara says. Matar metzer. Rain can be stopped, and it can be totally how the people act, and Eliyahu Hanavi was geyser, and the rain did not fall down. But dude always comes down. So in Shemayim itself, in the things that come from heaven, Tal is the best. And the same thing, Mea Aretz, you could have the Aretz. Umishmane Aretz means not just Aretz, but the best, the richest, the most fatty part of the earth. Brochos hanailos yoser af me birchas Yaakov lebano birchas Moshe Yisrael. It's brought down another Mamorim that Yitzchok's bracha to Yaakov was more powerful than Yaakov Avinu's brachas to the Shvatim and greater in the brachas of Moshe Rabbeinu. How does it come? Yitzchok is a Yish Hagevurah. Yitzchok is about Pachad Yitzchok and Tzimtzum and so on. How does he come to give such amazing brachas? So, by the way, in other places the Rebbe explains that Gevurah is from the word Tagboiras HaChayis. That let's say there's what's called Gevuros Geshamim. In the second bracha of Shemoneh Esrei, Ata Gibur Lo'olam Hashem, that's Keneged Yitzchok. Over there is where we say Masha V'Ruach U'Moed HaGeshem. And we talk about Tchias HaMeisim and so on, because these are all brachas that come from Hashem's power and strength. Not Gevurah from the word limitation and constriction and symptom, but from a Ribi brachas. And that's also the idea that says V'yitin l'chayil lakim et al shamayim. So Rashi says, why does it say V'yitin? The vav is a vav ha'moisiv. It has to be connected to something else. The bracha began with the word V'yitin. He didn't say anything beforehand. Why does that say V'yitin? So Rashi says Yitin v'yachzor v'yitin, meaning that the brachas were like piling up on top of each other more and more. Because it's one thing, if I am a Gevurah person, if that's my nature, I have to turn the Gevurah inward. But to another, I have to be B'tachlis HaChesed. V'zoi ha'irav avidas sh'kol echad me'Yisrael. Sh'harei Yitzchok hu echad ha'avis sh'kol echad me'Yisrael. And because he's one of the avis of every single Yid, v'al kein yesh b'chol echad me'inyanov shel Yitzchok. The Rebbe even says, I was reading in a Fabrenga from Tavshon Lamed Gimel, the Rebbe said an interesting thing. It says, Vayizra Yitzchok Meya Sha'arim, also in this week's parsha. Vayizra Yitzchok Vayimta Meya Sha'arim. Vayvarchei Hashem. And it says over there, what's Meya Sha'arim? He made 100 times more than was projected. 100 times more than was supposed to be. So the Rebbe says like this, since every Yid is a ben Avraham, Yitzchok, Yaakov, and he is Yerush from Avraham, Yitzchok, Yaakov. So for a Yid, it's natural, it's normal, because he gets it by inheritance from Yitzchok, that every Yid should have Meya Sha'arim, should have 100 times as much as what a guy would have normally come out. For a Yid, it's a normal thing to have 100 times as much. Because a Yid is a Yerush from Yitzchok. So for sure, when it comes to Ruchnis, the Kinyanim, we definitely are Yerush from Yitzchok. So Gam Kasher Yehudi Oimid Man Haged the Kavak Vurah V'Lachein Machmir V'Chulu. He's very stringent on himself and he's very careful, etc., etc. Tzarech Hadavar Liyis Rak Menegel LaAtzmai. Ilu Klape Azulas Olav Linog B'Kavak Chesed. Lisyachas Elav B'Midas HaToiv Ulashpia Loi Toiv B'Yad Rechava L'Loi Tzimtzumim V'Agbolas Klal Ad L'Mida HaNailos B'Yoyser Mital HaShamayim Mishmane Haaretz.